started. It's good to have everybody here. I was beginning to wonder if I'd been fired because the teacher stands way over there. But I guess I haven't been yet. Nobody else ran up here. Title of today's lesson is Every Scar Tells a Story. Every scar tells a story. Probably if you look down at a scar on your hand or your arm or your leg or something, you can remember how you got that. I have 3 little scars right here and 1 or 2 more on the back of my hand. And Connie was looking at them the other day. She said, "When did you get those, or how did you get those?" I said, "High school football, got stepped on me." I told her the story, and I said, "Okay." And so we all have scars. One that I've got is my finger here, cut off when I was 18, 19 years old, butchered for my daddy. And everybody goes, "Oh, that had to hurt." It did, but it was funny. And I'll tell you the brief little story. I cut it off, slicing some steaks. I wrapped it up in my apron and was holding it and hollered, "Daddy, you need to come get me and take me to the hospital to cut my finger off." And he and the 2 ladies who worked for us came back laughing at me. "Oh, David, quit telling us. Show it." So I unwrapped it, blood was going. So I wrapped it back up, and then they panicked. And one of them started hollering, "Put a tourniquet on it, put a tourniquet on it." And my daddy wrapped the towel around my arm up here, but thank goodness he didn't tighten it. And then we got out to the car. He's in the car on the driver's side. I'm standing outside the passenger side holding my finger, and he's hollering, "Get in, get in." I gotta keep pressure. I can't open the door. Oh, so he opened the door and let me in. We got to the doctor's office, then they sent me to the hospital, and we got over there, and Daddy could not answer one question. He didn't know my name, my first name, nothing. So I'm sitting there holding the finger shut, and I'm telling everybody all the information. So they get me upstairs to the room, and the nurse says, "Who was that man?" I said, "That was my daddy." And she said, "You realize he didn't sign anything? We can't touch you." They said, "You need to go to the phone over there and call your mother." I said, "She's worse. You've got to call her." So I called my mother. I said, "Mama, you will never guess where I am." She's where? And I said, "I cut my finger off, and Daddy brought me to the hospital and left me. And they didn't sign anything, and so they can't do anything." "Oh, David." "Mama," I said, "What do you want for lunch?" I said, "Mother," and she hung up on me. And I turned around to the nurse and said, "Well, is she coming?" She hung up on me. I don't know if she's coming or not. Well, she called the store, and one of the ladies that worked there started bawling and crying and told her what happened. And so now my mother can't drive, so my younger sister, who's just barely 16, has to drive her to the hospital for me. So we've laughed a lot about that story. It's a great story. It's a great scar. And it wasn't fun getting it, but it's been a good storyteller. Tayan Redgate, some of y'all probably know her. She came over here to the teacher training stuff when she was in high school. And it's Daisha, be Diane's granddaughter. I had just moved to Winoka, and we were at a basketball one night. She saw my finger, and she said, "How'd you get that? What happened?" I said, "Well, Tayan, I was picking my nose and a booger bit it off." And so she started sticking her finger up her own nose. "No, it isn't." I said, "You got to stick it up your mother's nose." So she's trying to, Daisha slapping her, yelling at me, "Quit telling my daughter stuff like that." So it's been a lot of fun. Every scar tells a story. I mean, you stop and think, if you look in John chapter 20, you've got, this is after Jesus' death and his resurrection, and he's appearing to different people, to the apostles and all the others. And in John chapter 20, and I apologize for whatever version I'm in here, I don't really know. I put this lesson together 2 or 3 years ago. In John chapter 20, starting in verse 19, on the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord, and again Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger where the nails were, put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Those scars are going to have to tell me a story. I'm going to have to personally see all of this before I can believe all of this. It's basically what Thomas was saying. And then starting on down verse 26, a week later his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Have you ever seen those holes? Never. I don't need to see them. I think they would be interesting to see, but I don't need to see them. I have faith that everything that the scriptures tell me about Jesus' death and his life were true. There's a lot of people that don't believe it. I was down in Wanette, Oklahoma yesterday. If you don't know where Wanette is, you go to Purcell. It is south and east of Purcell, about 20, 30 miles. One of my really good friends that I grew up with passed away, and we were 5 months age difference, and they had his service. His little brother, who's 4 years younger than me, asked me if I would help do the service, so I drove down yesterday and did that. And I met lots of people from down there, and Jim's grandkids and people that I had not met. Jim and I said we went back. His mother babysat me while she was pregnant with him, and then took care of both of us after he was born. So I've known him his whole life. And you got to realize Jim is about as hickey as you can get. I mean, probably about 15 years ago, I came home from being at the hospital visiting, and I walked in the door. Connie said, "Bill, you can go listen to that message in there." I said, what's it? It's just weird. You need to go listen to that message. She said, "Somebody called and left you a message," and it doesn't make any sense at all. So I went back, punched the button, and Jim, I'll try to imitate him. "Hey, 9.5. This is Jimbo. Give me a call." And so from then on, he and I have talked to each other about every week and a half or so. We call. We'll talk anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. In fact, the day that we were on our way down to get the granddaughters last week, he called, and we were going through an area that you drop phone calls, and we had talked about 30 minutes. I said, "Jim, I'm probably fixing to lose you because we're going through this area." And he said, "That's fine. I love you, Bubba. Call me back sometime." And I said, "All right." Well, then at 4 o'clock in the morning, I got the message that he had passed away. And so I told Connie, I said, it hurts because I hung up on one of my best friends. And it was the last time I was ever going to get to hear him talk again. And she said, "Yeah, but Bill, you probably would have lost his call. And so then he wouldn't have known if you were hurt." You know, I know, but still, that scar, to me, I'll carry with me forever because we'd been really, really good friends our whole lives. And I hung up on him, and he died about 14 hours later. And so I went down and helped with that funeral yesterday, and it was not a fun day, but it was a fun day. because I got to hear other people tell stories about Jim, because they had known him for 30, 40 years down at Wadette area. But anyhow, enough about me. All of us have some scars, and some scars are visible, like the ones we talked about, but some scars are not. Emotionally, we can be scarred. Things can bother us that don't bother other people. I was blessed not to have to go to war. I came out of high school the year that Vietnam was winding down and they were starting the volunteer army. And so luckily for me, or I was blessed, whatever you want to say, that I didn't have to go. And they did the lottery and my number was 88. My stepbrother's number was 85. And anyone in Oklahoma under 100 was reclassified 1A, which meant you're the first ones to go until you're 25 years old. And so we kind of worried a little bit. We prayed that the volunteer army would be great, and we were glad it was, but I know of lots of friends that went off to war, came back, who had emotional problems from all the trauma and stuff that they witnessed and experienced. You couldn't tell it by looking at them, but if you knew them well enough, you knew that they struggled. And so we have people around us that have some of those emotional scars that we don't know about unless they share them with us. And to get them to share them, we don't want to get nosy, but we've got to be a good friend. And sometimes people that are good friends will tell you stuff that you didn't know. And some stuff you didn't want to know, probably. But again, scars also remind us, hey, don't make that same mistake again. I still butchered for my dad, but I made sure those fingers stayed way away. I was slicing 13 ribeye steaks, was cutting the 13th one, and it rolled all of a sudden and jerked this, and also clipped the top of my thumb, but it was stitched back together. But I respected that saw more than I ever did beforehand. And it makes us more aware. You know, you look at the Bible, you look at the Old Testament, and also the New Testament. We'll look at some passages here in a minute. In the Bible, you can go back and see that, well, 1 Corinthians 10:11 says, these things happened to them as examples and were written for our admonition. The stuff that went wrong and the stuff that went right are written there for us to learn from those people's scars and the things that happened in their lifetime. I mean, we know that the children of Israel, God loved them. He did all kinds of stuff for them, yet repeatedly they got involved in idolatry, started marrying people they weren't supposed to marry. You got the wisest man, Solomon. You know, he had 1,000 women. Was it 300 wives and 700 concubines, I think? Or is it vice versa? For Solomon. I think it's 300 wives and 700 concubines. Yeah. And you read through the scriptures there, and it talks about they led him to start worshiping their ways. And he's building special places for their gods. And here he is, the smartest guy alive. And he's making dumb mistakes. And so those things are there to teach us what not to do. And we might think, well, we don't have an idol. Really? How many watch the football game on Super Bowl Sunday? Probably several. And I'm not running down the Super Bowl, but sometimes people put a major priority on my dad. I loved him more than any person that I knew in my life at that time. He loved his family. He loved his job and all that. But on football days, if football and baseball were both going on, we had 2 TVs in the living room, one football game here, one football game here, and he had the headphones from the stereo system hooked up to the Texas Rangers playing baseball. And he could tell you what was going on in all three of them at the same time. How? I never know. He used to get upset because I would not sit there and watch football with him. Which game? Well, David, I'd leave and it'd make him mad because there were guys, I lived right at the end of the football field. There were guys over there playing football. Why would I want to be sitting in a chair watching football, as a teenager when I could be, where we lived, there was a basketball court, high school tennis courts, the football field, and the baseball field was right over there. So if there was a game going on any of them, and I wasn't at the store working, I was over on one of those fields, tennis courts or basketball courts, playing ball with everybody else. But some people, it became sports. I know we tease Ray about the Ohio State. And his love for the Ohio State. I always want to look at what about the Michigan? But I know I won't get a positive comment back. But now, am I saying that Ray loves the Ohio State more than he loves preaching and teaching? No. It's just a good joke. I told Connie one day a bowl game was fixed to start. I think I'm going to call Ray and tell him we need him at the hospital. And I laughed and told Ray that these are people who've done that to me before. But we can get so many different idols. Kids, you ask them who they want to be like. They don't want to be like Christ. If they're a basketball player, they want to be Michael Jordan, or did with my younger days. I don't know who the top, what's the guy from the Thunder that's supposed to be really good.
Shea Alexander.
Yeah. They want to be like him. That's who they pattern their life after, is getting to be like him. And that's good, but it's also bad. I've mentioned Gracie before. She loves softball, enjoys softball, but always remind her, don't lose track of what's important. Don't give up on what is the utmost important. Because all that junk you're winning and all that stuff, it's going to burn up one of these days. But we all have some scars or things out there, and like I said, the Bible's full of examples of how the children of Israel chose to rebel against God. In some ways, we know of people who do the same thing. We know some who have left the church for one reason or another and have zero desire to come back. But if we will admit it, in some ways we rebel in our own way, even though we're here when the doors are open. What do we live like outside of here? Do we study our Bibles? Do we talk to people? Do we model the example that needs to be modeled? Because I know of an elder somewhere, not here, that he's the most super nice guy you've ever seen at the building. But downtown, people won't have anything to do with him because he has mistreated them in business deals and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, wow. And everybody knows he's an elder in the church at that particular place. And yet the life he's showing outside the doors, when you invite people in, I ain't going there, not as long as that guy's alive. Wow. And so we can have our own gods and things that can lead us down the wrong direction. A good friend wrong you. One of my other good friends growing up, if you ever wrong him or anyone in his family, zero. He wouldn't even speak to you. If you were on fire, he wouldn't pour water on you just because you hurt his family. His daddy was the same way. His daddy and I were really good friends. And he would come in our grocery store and I'd argue with him. And he would gripe and fuss at me. And every time before he left, he'd say, you know, if I didn't love you, I wouldn't treat you like this. I said, well, you know, I wished you hated me. And he'd just laugh on his way out the door. But he and I had that rapport, but some people couldn't treat him like that. But I had treated him like that since I was that tall. Argued with him about everything. But God expects us to live peaceably with people outside the church, as well as inside. How much problems would we have here if a little clique got together and started trouble. It's happened in a lot of places where people want to stir up trouble. They're not happy if somebody's not mad. In Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 9, starts off with, in this version, let love be genuine. Don't fake it. Show love to people. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. My mother said, David, that means kill them with kindness. Be so kind and nice to them that they feel guilty, and they start being kind and nice back to you. Always love everyone. Don't be a problem. You know, Simon Peter, if you look in Luke chapter 22, scars remind us of past failures. They don't make us useless. And I'm not talking about the scar on my hands or arm. I could point to some more football scars and stuff I have too. But in Luke 22, starting in verse 31, Jesus talking here, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you that he might sift you like wheat. And I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Peter said to him, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day till you deny me 3 times. Deny 3 times that you know me. Jesus knew that Peter was fixing to get a scar. He knew he was fixing to make a mistake. But he also knew that Peter was going to return and become, well, as one man said, you know, Jesus had told him earlier he was going to give him the keys to the kingdom. He got to fire up the engine on the day of Pentecost. Then he got to fire up the engine again with the people, the Gentile people. And so Jesus knew Peter was going to stumble. Peter was, I ain't no way I'm going to mess up. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. We know that in Luke 22, starting verse 54 and following, they've taken Jesus and Peter's there. Says here in verse 54, they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house, and Peter was following from a distance. King James Version says he was following from afar off. And I made a sermon out several years ago about afar. A fire, you know, sometimes there's a fire over there. Well, here Peter was following from afar. He didn't want to be right there with Jesus because he knew Jesus was in trouble. But he wanted to be a witness to what was going on. And then we see the situation here where 3 times, just like Jesus said, you want to, no, I don't know the man. Yeah, no. Never heard of him, basically. And then, can you imagine being Peter when that 3rd time he denied Jesus and the rooster went, arr. And he looks up and Jesus is looking right at him. Whoa. Now what we got to remember is when we're out making dumb mistakes, Jesus is right there looking at us. He can see everything we do. He's not like me. I can only see you individually. But I don't know what this one over here is doing right now because I can't see him right now. But God can see all of us. But we do know that, as I said a while ago, Peter came back. He went out and he wept bitterly. He had a big scar in his heart. And he came back on fire instead of afar. He was gung-ho to do everything that he possibly could to stand up against those religious leaders and let them know, guys, you killed the Son of God. It was the plan before the world began that this was going to take place. We didn't know that. We don't know that till we get to read the Bible and see that we're told it was planned from way back then. But now the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have the power to stand? Or do we get as far off as we can, where we don't get affected in any way? Comments. My wife gets on me for doing too much talking. Luckily, she's not in here.
She's not here.
She's teaching the class, so I talk all I want. And then you look at another situation, not with Jesus, not with Peter. We look in Acts chapter 15, starting in verse 36. Paul and Barnabas had been on mission journeys, and they decided, hey, we need to go back and check on everything. And starting in verse 36, after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are. Now Barnabas wanted to take with him John, called Mark. But Paul thought best not to take with him one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with him to the word. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so that they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed to Cyprus. Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. And he went through Syria, Cilicia, and strengthened the church. Peter got a second chance. He had the opportunity after he repented. Why wouldn't Peter give John Mark the same option? Don't know. The Bible doesn't tell me. Except he didn't like the fact that he quit. Well, guess what, Peter? You quit Jesus when you said, I don't know him, never heard of him. Basically the same thing. Same type of thing, I guess I might say. But then later in 2 Timothy chapter 4, John Mark had a scar in Peter's eyes. He was bad news. Yet in 2 Timothy chapter 4, Luke alone, Paul is writing, Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me for ministry. He proved that a second chance was worth it. Do we need second chances? I probably need 1,000 chances. Because I know during my lifetime, like I used to tell the kids in Bible class, I don't get up every morning planning how to sin, but I find a way to do it every day. Not because I want to, I just make dumb decisions at times. Again, our story is our story. We know it. God knows it. God knows when we make mistakes. God knows when we ask forgiveness for those mistakes. He knows if we're really trying. Connie asked me out in the car, well, how many days did you get this week? I said 7. I said, but some may say, well, he wasn't really in the Bible. I said, I worked on my lesson, so I had to be in the Bible looking up stuff, and I had to, prepare for this talk or this whatever. So I was in the Bible looking up lessons. I wasn't reading chapter after chapter after chapter. And I said, in fact, last night I was so tired that I thought, oh, I haven't read my Bible today officially. So I got my Bible out and I'm reading and my eyes are going. So I shook myself, I read one chapter and I closed. I told Connie, I got to quit. I was officially in the Bible reading. And I read Bible verses at Jim's funeral. And I said, so technically, I was in the Bible, but I didn't read 3 or 4 chapters like I try to do each day. But so technically I have 7, even though it wasn't as much. She said, I've done the same thing. When I get totally exhausted laying there reading, she said, I finished what I was, the one chapter I was on, and I said to close my eyes to rest. I said, well, good. I'm glad to hear that you and I are alike in that respect. But stories are there, like I said, scars are there due to usually poor decisions that we've made. Now, the scars playing football that I have, the scar for cutting off my finger, yeah, that was a bad situation. Shouldn't have had it where it was. The others are just got my hand in the wrong place, or my arm in the wrong place, or whatever, and somebody stepped on me. And so, the comment then would be, well, get faster and get up. That would be what some people would say. But again, not all of them are from foolishness. Think about, I don't know, you can go back and read in these books how each one of the apostles died. Now, I don't know. I mean, they may be exactly 100% true. I have no idea. Whether Peter was crucified upside down, whether this, I don't know. I mean, you can look in history and you can find, I assume that's where they found all these. Yeah, so they all had some scars, but it wasn't from doing something wrong and making wrong choices. It was for standing up for right choices. Is why they wound up getting their scars, their ending of their life. So we're going to get some scars. Now again, I've mentioned this I don't know how many times, but not being raised in the church and obeying the gospel and then start preaching. I've had some scars from family members, from other people that I grew up with. Yesterday, Mike Buxton, which is Jim's little brother, you got to realize the Buxton family were super, super poor. I mean, their dad was injured and couldn't work. Every morning at 4 o'clock they got up, they drove to Manitou, which is 9 miles away, picked up the Daily Oklahoman, and they drove through the country rolling them and delivering them to people's houses till time to get home to milk the cow and do their chores with the animals and get to school. Soon as school was out, they had another paper route Monday through Friday. That was how they made their living. They worked like crazy. There were 7 kids and a mama and daddy in a 1-bathroom house. But the way Mike said, we were the richest people in town as far as I'm concerned. We didn't have anything in the bank, but we did everything as a family. And I laughed. I said, Mike, Jim grew up. He quit high school, joined the Army, got injured, got put out of the Army, became a truck driver, moved to Wanette. He became the mayor of Wanette. Mike, his younger brother, was the sheriff of Madill for about 20-something years. I said, can you imagine if we went back to Tipton, me, you, and Jim, sitting around a group of people, they find out that Jim was the mayor, you were the marshal, and I was a Church of Christ preacher. How many looks do you think we'd get? He said, I bet we would get shocking. Yeah. How in the world did those 3 do that? And so that would be a scar to a degree. Of course, we'd be doing it just to watch the faces of other people. I know us. But we all have some scars. Not all of them were from wrong choices. Some of them were from right choices, like I'm talking about the apostles. and how they met their death, if they met it like it says historically. Yet, do you think they'd trade those scars to be? Would Paul have traded his scars from all the beatings and everything that happened to him to get to be the high priest of the Jewish nation? Don't think so. He was a very devout Pharisee and became a Christian, and then the physical abuse that he went through, yet he never once quit. He took those scars. Wasn't for wrongdoing, for doing what's right. And if we take stands and do what's right, in ways we're going to get some scars. You know, Matthew chapter 10, starting in verse 16. Excuse me just a minute. Matthew 10, verse 16. How would you like to be instructed by your, what's called Jesus the boss? Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. I'm sending you out and you're going to get, ravished. People are not going to like what you're doing and what you're saying. But I'm going to send you out there. How many would jump up on, oh yeah, oh yeah. Or when the people were scattering when the persecution in Acts chapter 8, and they're going through the land and they're telling everybody about Jesus, and they're going, why are you on the run? Wait, let me tell you about Jesus. And you can be obedient and you can become like me and have to run for your life. How many volunteers do you think people, oh yeah, that's what I want? But they were still doing what they were supposed to do. Yeah, Jesus goes on in about verse 21. Brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child, and children will rise against their parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But one who endures to the end will be saved. You're going to have horrible treatment by people. But look on the bright side. 20 years of abuse later, you're going to get the blessings I told you about. You know, what ties through 20 out there. And all of us have probably had some family or friends who've kind of looked down on us because of what we believe. You know, get made fun of by friends or family. Can't believe you believe that you got to be baptized. I can't believe you believe. It says there that all I got to do is believe, and I heard that out how many times yesterday in Jim's funeral. That all we have to do is believe. If you don't understand it, come get with me or some of these others. They can explain to you how to become a Christian and what words to say. I told Connie I wanted to argue with him, but I thought that's not the right place. Because it was his brother's funeral. But I said, Jim was a super, super good guy. And I pray that they're more right than I am wrong. That God is more lenient than what I see. That I'm more narrow-minded than what I read in his Bible. But I think I read it correctly. That there's a certain way we have to do things to be pleasing to God. And again, that doesn't mean just to become a Christian, just attend 3 or 4 hours a week. We got to live the other 164 hours as a Christian while we're out in our everyday lives. At work, at Walmart, while we're waiting in line. People like to gripe when they get in line at Walmart. And that's fine. I usually laugh and cut up with them, trying to, if I know the checker, I trash the checker. If I were to go up to Atwood's
and there was a line, and his line, I'd start trashing how sorry the checkers are in this store. They'd get better people. He would be laughing because he knew I was just talking smack. Some of those people would think that we're fixing to come to blows. And then we'd both start laughing and realize they're just enjoying each other at our expense. And so, don't be one of those fussers and complainers. Let's strive to be remember where we read a while ago? Be affectionate, be loving, be caring, all the things that God expects of us. Jesus can heal all of our scars, not the physical ones. I'm still going to have them. But the scars of our sin, we get forgiveness for those things by being obedient, by living faithfully as obedient Christians. Those scars can be healed. These scars that people can actually see, those don't disappear. Young man I grew up with who had gotten involved in drugs, and he was at church camp one year, Falls Creek, and he asked Jesus into his heart. He said he became a preacher, and he had told everybody beforehand he had never done drugs. It would amaze me, after he was saved, he was showing people his arms and telling them that all his needle track marks had disappeared when he obeyed God. I've known you since we were babies. Don't try to sell that stupidity to me. But those that didn't know him, they were believing it. But these scars on my hands and arms, legs, are not going to disappear because I obeyed the gospel. But the scar of sin can be removed, especially if I continue to serve him correctly. But again, every scar has a story. All of us can tell someone how we obey the gospel, why we obey the gospel. So, just food for thought. Why don't we close with a word of prayer? Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that we have to come together like this to spend time studying your word. Pray, Father, everything's been said today and all the class has been according to your will. Pray, Father, that you'll bless each one of us. Guide us as we go through life. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.